guess I could have been recording that breakdown, but um, okay. So what I'm going to do today is show you a couple of um, techniques, I guess. I keep calling them tips and tricks, but they're really just individual techniques within the software, within 2D animation that you can use um, to create what is effectively the illusion of motion, right? We've all kind of seen that so far that like, you know, we're just crafting a bunch of pixels that come out of our screen at the end. And so sometimes it just has to look good by the time it's over with. It doesn't have to be, completely 100% like. I guess a good example of this is your lip sync piece. Your character doesn't have to have legs because we're never going to see your character's legs. And some people will still draw the legs and rig the legs and then just show the character from the chest up. And that's not necessary. And I think one of the things to take away from this is efficiency. Think about what it is you want to eventually have on the screen. And once you start to understand a whole bunch of the tools that are within the program, we can leverage those different tools in order to eventually get get that final result, right? And so I'm gonna show you a couple of different things, right? The first one I thought was kind of interesting. We talked about blinks, right? Your characters eventually need to blink. You need the eyes to move around. I showed you earlier on how to break the eyes out into a separate layer, and you can move those around individually. And I think that's also a good example of how we're crafting an illusion there, right? It looks like your eyeballs are rotating, but really you're just moving that dot around inside of a larger circle, right? But when it comes to blinking, like that's actually kind of more complex than we think of it, because what we have is a flap of skin that is sort of adhering to the surface of this round shape and going over our eye. The thing about that is when you do a cartoon, you don't always do a perfectly spherical eye. Like eyes can be all sorts of different shapes. And so I want to show you a way of kind of faking that, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I'm going to quickly make a very simple eye. My colors out here, this will work. I'm going to use just the standard shapes, create a couple of drawings. Yeah, so close that. Drawing one, I'm just going to draw a sphere. And then I'm just going to fill that with white. This could be white. I don't know why I'm doing this out here on frame 70. Let's pull this back to the beginning. There we go. So here I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to do for the eye. Oh, it's because I saw it set to white. I'm going to go ahead and do this for like an iris here. I'll go ahead and fill that one in with black. Just kind of making a simple cartoony eye, right? And so or let's call this iris. I don't know if that really is the iris or not. So for these other two, I'll call this top lid and bottom lid. I'm going to make some shapes that don't make sense for that, right? I'm just going to go up here with a rectangle, and I'm just going to make a giant box above this eye. Maybe something like this. Go ahead and move that around up to here. for the color of this, I'm going to go ahead and make it kind of skin tone. Finding a good skin tone is something I'm actually really terrible at. This. Let's try that. Sure. Let's try that. So I'll go ahead and flood that with our skin tone. I'm still not happy with that. Sorry. Maybe something like that. Okay. So again, I have our object up here for a top lid, or for, I'm sorry, this is for the bottom lid. Let's go ahead and move it down here. Just to make it easy, I'm just going to duplicate all of that, Control C, and then on my top lid, Control V, paste that in there. And so now I have one for the top lid. Right? So it just looks like two boxes surrounding my object. It doesn't look like lids, right? So I want to show you the sort of the trick to this. You know what, just to make this a little simpler to start with, never mind. To make this a little simpler to start with, I'm going to hide the iris, because that's going to sort of come in there later. No, that's all right, I can use the iris. All right, so as it is right now, my pivot points on these objects are all at the center. I'm going to go ahead and move these up here, just so they're in a more reasonable place. My iris, that's not bad. And my eye white, I'll go ahead and put that a little more to the center. And of course with the iris, I can just animate this now to make it look like the character's looking around. Right? We can talk about that later here too, the way the iris comes outside of the eye. There's a way we can fix that as well. So let's go to our node view. Select everything, organize this in a way we can see it. Okay. So as it is in our node view, right, each of these four drawings are all plugging into our composite node, right? And so this is one of the things I want you to kind of start thinking about. The reason this is a node and not a layer, like you maybe have used layers in Photoshop, right? Layers in Photoshop are very much like if you were just drawing on clear pieces of plastic and layering them on top of each other. And that means there has to be a consecutive order in which all of those things happen. I can't have a layer in Photoshop be both above and below an object without deleting it. But here, I can, actually. I could have this eye, like this eye drawing that is in here, I could pipe this thing into my composite node a dozen times, really. Really what's happening now is it's taking that one drawing and it's redrawing it on my screen 4 times. It's just drawing it in the same place every time. Right? I could also very easily just duplicate this and plug it in multiple places. So there's a reason that this node view becomes more powerful is because we're not dependent on it all stacking on top of each other. Which means I can reuse elements for multiple purposes, even if they're not for visible purposes, right? So to show you this, actually let me go ahead and make a couple of other items here that I can just show you separately, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this eye white twice. Right, so duplicate selected layer, and then duplicate selected layer, and we'll call this example 1. example 2. And so now those are all in here as well, right? Let's just sort of pull these off to the side so I can show you some stuff. And in our viewport, I'm going to go ahead and move these off to the side too, just so you can kind of see both of them and how this is going to affect them. The one. So example 1, example 2, they are plugging into the composite node in that order, which means example 1 is on top, right? If I move this over here, you'll see that it's on top. And the thing we've already kind of familiar with is if I just switch those two, now example 2 is on top, right? But there are other things that we can do with this node. It doesn't just have to go into the composite so we can see it. If I unplug it, the example 1 drawing is still there, right? I can now pipe that into other nodes to drive elements of this object, right? And one of the easiest ones we can do is just to put this into the top of example 2. So you'll see that if I take the blue line and try to plug it into the top, I can't plug it in. I can plug it into the transformation. That'll allows me to use it as a like a parent, right? But there's this thing right here called mat. And if you look at it, it draws like a little mask, like a little eye mask, right? And if I click it in there, you'll see now what I get is that. And this is much different. This means if I use example 1, I can use example 1 to drive what is actually visible on example 2. Example 1 is still that full drawing. We're just not seeing it. We're using it for other purposes, right? We're using it to mask out things in this. We could go even further with this. Maybe I don't want to use that as a mask, right? Maybe I wanted to, let's look at our node library and try some stuff here. Maybe I wanted to use that as, just search. I want to use this as a shadow, right? So I can pipe this into shadow and pipe shadow into there, right? And so now I get a shadow that I can drive. Why is it not showing it? Just want to see the shadow. Let's see what it looks like in the actual render. Oh, it's way outside there, never mind. So I get this shadow underneath it, and if I plug that shadow underneath here, then basically it just looks like my, I don't know why it keeps disappearing. It just looks like my, my ball is casting a shadow, right? I could then have exercise 2, or example 2, drive example 1. Oh, I don't know why that just happened. Sorry, that's the wrong way. Like that. And what should happen now is whenever I am moving example 1, oh, put it over there. Example 2 is going to cast a shadow, right? So let me do that again. Go ahead and move example 2 over here. Shadow of it. So now I can animate example 2 and just have it cast shadows on stuff. Again, I don't know why it keeps blinking that shadow back out. But you can kind of see that if I go to my render now. As I move example 2, it's just going to cast a shadow on other objects, right? So this is ways that I can leverage these drawings in here and use them in a whole bunch of different ways. Some of you are probably already seeing what I'm going to do with those boxes now, right? So So let's just go ahead and delete those drawings. And I'll show you. So we have our bottom lid, we have our top lid, we have our eye white, we have our iris, right? And I think this works fine. All I really need to do now is pipe my eye white into the mask of my top lid and my bottom lid. And basically that means that, all that means is whenever they overlap each other, you're going to get to see that eyelid, but only if they overlap each other, right? An interesting thing about this is I could go to top lid and my layer properties, and I can, there's an invert mask here somewhere. I think it's under drawing, yeah, invert matte. And you'll see that even though I basically just inverted what was happening, which part was going to be visible and which one wasn't. So even though top lid is above the eye white, it should be showing over top of it. Basically what I'm saying is I still want you to cut that part out. And I still want you to mask that part out. And then if I, again, uninvert it, I get the opposite of that. Again, this will happen the same with the bottom lid. And interestingly, even though the iris is on a different layer, it's still covering that up because our iris is behind bottom lid and top lid in terms of draw order, right? How that pipes into the composite. So this is a really quick and easy way to have these invisible objects that eventually turn into our character's eyelids, right? Does that make sense? What we've done here? One of the things you will notice is that it's covering up the drawing line, like the stroke. There's a way of fixing that. I just don't want to really dive too deeply into it in this class. Basically what we do is we have to use the color layer to drive this mask instead of just the entire image. And so we would just use another node to do that. So it's not a big deal on that, but I just wanted to show you this as a way of doing that. Now, the other thing we could do is if we have, let's go ahead and open our character's eyes a little bit more, make him just a little bit less stoned. There we go. So one of the issues we still have, though, is that if I have my character look too far to this side, the eye goes outside of the eyeball, right? So we could still use that same cutter or that same mat from the eye white on the iris to fix that, right? If I pipe that into the top of the iris, now basically the only time the iris is visible is when it's within this shape. If I were to move my top lid so you can see this a little bit better, like this is going to happen no matter where our eye is at, right? Does that make sense? Okay, like this is possibly like one of the 5 most useful tools I've taught in this class. Like it is absolutely like once you grasp this, like there's so much you can do with this thing in order to fake entire sections of animation, right? These masks will allow you to build these giant influence areas, right? On whatever it is you want to happen. You want spotlights, you want the spotlights to only affect certain elements, like all sorts of different things that we can do with this. So if it wasn't clear, go back and, I would say test this out. Like go back and sort of play with this a little bit in your, like in your spare time, or even as one of the three animations of this dude. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just save this one really quick because I was tinkering with that. And then I'm going to make another example in here. So I'm going to make some new layers. I'm going to make one called head, one called nose, one called Let's try L-I-R-I and mouth. So I just made a whole bunch of empty layers for a face. Right? I really wanted to just show you that like one of the problems with rigs is that people will limit it like to a point that your character, like some of you were recognizing that. You were drawing your character in a 3/4 view, and then later you needed it in a different pose. And like that's kind of hard to like get your character, turned to the front again without just doing a completely new drawing. If you're making a really robust rig, what you could do is just draw your character sort of at 30-degree increments, right? Like the 90-degree, probably 45-degree increments. The 90-degree, the 45, the straight on, the other 45, the other 90. And then you can kind of switch in between those, or even smaller increments if you wanted to get really precise about it. You can kind of switch in between those different rigs at whatever point you need them. But there are times where you just need a full head turn for just a very small amount of animation. And so I wanted to show you, just using that as an example, one of the some of the little tricks we can do to kind of fake that. Okay, so I'm going to just have a character's head moving like kind of from one side to the other of the screen. That's going to dip just a little bit. Right. So I'm going to make a very simple head. This is literally, I forgot my Cintiq pen downstairs, so I'm literally just going to start making this like kind of freehand with the mouse. It's really not that big of a deal. No, it's not that big of a deal. So we'll do that. Here we go. So we got this character's head, and I drew that on the mouth layer. So let's fix that. Control X. Control V. So again, this is literally just sort of a stick figure character. So delete the layer. So on the nose layer, I'm going to sort of move the head first, right? So let's just say let's make it a pretty quick head turn. Let's do 12 frames, right? So F5, extend that out, trim this to here. So just over that span of time, I'm going to have my character go from here, so I'm going to hit F6 for that keyframe, to over here, right? And I'll go ahead and put a breakdown in the middle that kind of pulls the head down a little bit, right? So we get basically from here, there, back up to there. That's why we use F6. So that, what's happening? Let's go to 13, just to make this balance out a little bit easier. There we go. So, I'm also going to just a little bit, I'm going to skew this on each end. So it's looking this way, again, F6, over here, I'm looking this way, F6. In the middle, we could drag it either way. More than likely, what I'll just do is sort of squash it just a little bit right in the middle. And then finally, I'm going to go into my function editor and just make that a little cleaner, just so we get a little bit of a better transition there, mainly with my position Z and Y. Just go ahead and grab all of that, smooth, these in and out. That's maybe a little too much ease in and out. Let's do like that. Rotation Z, I'll go ahead and add, or angle Z. I'll go ahead and frame that up. Doesn't look like we did very much there. And then skew, I'll go ahead and set that to smooth as well. Set it like that. That's not. So I could go a lot more into detail just to get that head movement. But this should do. Yeah, I probably would go back in later just to get like some arcs in there, but I'm not sweating that. So what I want to do is, in my first pose, I'm going to go ahead and draw those other facial features as if the character is looking to one side of the screen, right? The hard part is how do I get them to the opposite of that, looking at the other side of the screen? And so there are ways that we can kind of cheat that, and that's really what this is all about, is just showing you some of those cheats. The first one I wanted to show you is, it's called a morph, right? So for the character's nose, I'm going to use the pencil. I'm going to use a black line, or maybe I'll just use a darker skin tone line here, right? And I'm just going to draw a very simple nose shape, right? Maybe something like this. I can still go in here and edit that all I want. All right, so I can do something like that. Shrink it down a little bit. And really, like, what the question is how do I get it over to here looking in the other direction? Right? So that's kind of a hard thing to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do half of it. I'm just going to try to get it to that center point, right? And the way I'm going to do that is, crap, did I draw that on the nose layer? I did. Control X. Let's go ahead and put that, there we go, where it belongs. I'm not sure what's happening there. So let's go ahead and delete that keyframe. Okay. So this nose drawing, I'm going to go ahead and freeze the head just so it's not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and drop the nose under the head as well, just so it sort of is along for the ride. And then get all of this stuff in the right order. Okay. So our nose, but then our nose needs to be okay. And in fact, I'll go ahead and have the head just driving everything here. Even though I haven't drawn them yet. So what should happen now is that nose is going to go with it, but I want it to be on the other side of the face. Right? So I'm just going to go here about halfway through, right? And I'm going to duplicate this nose drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and click this Create Duplicate Drawing. And so now I have that same exact nose here. And then I'm going to use my editor tool here to go to about the center of the nose, I guess. I don't know. Let's just go ahead and kind of do like this. And just kind of reshape this nose into what I would imagine it would look like from the front. I'm going to try to make it as symmetrical as possible. And I'm also going to try to move all of these pieces over to the center of the face again. this. So if our character was looking right at us, what would that look like? Okay. So yeah, may not be perfect, but let's try something like this. Now, keep in mind, I used the same exact line, it has the same number of points on it. I just reshaped it to look different on this frame, right? And so that's one of the things that's going to make this easier for me. If I just drew a completely new line that was all over the place, the chances that this would work is less likely. But what I'm going to do from there is just highlight all of those frames here up to all of the first frames to the second frame, right? And then under animation, there's this option right here, morphing. See this? And so I'm going to just say create morph or create morphing and hope for the best. It really did not work. Where did it go? I bet it moved it off to the side somewhere. All right. Sorry. Maybe I don't actually need to grab that second one. Let's try this. Animation. Oh yeah, there it goes. So now my nose is going to go from this shape to this shape. Which allowed me to basically get 6 drawings out of 2, right? Or 7 drawings out of 2. If you use this correctly, it can save you a lot of time in recreating drawings. What it will not do is allow you to draw an entire character and morph that into a different drawing of an entire character. This is something that works on sort of a line-by-line basis. But once I have this, this is just keyframes, right? Or these are just drawings, right? So I could just delete those drawings and turn this morph into a series of images, right? So just highlight those and zoom in here a little bit more where you can see it. And then I right click on here and say morphing. Oh, sorry, apparently I deselected it. Highlight that, right click, morphing, convert morphing to drawings. And we'll call this nose, whatever. I don't even know why it needs that. And what I get now is each of those different drawings of the nose, right? Which means I can take all of these right here, control, actually I can do this in a very special way. If I highlight all of this right here, and right click and say, let's see, what was it at? Copy cells from timeline, right? I can go here and right click and say paste reverse. And what it's going to do is it's going to paste all of those cells, it's just going to paste them in the reverse order. Now I don't need this one right here because it's just a duplicate of the first one. So I can delete that and then drag those one frame back. And what I should have now, oh, not even close. Look at that. It reversed it on the other side, but that's okay. Because what I knew that's actually what I was going to do. What I want is for each of these morphs as it starts to come back, I just want to flip it, move it to a new spot, right? So for here, I can go in here, circle this. Let's circle it with the move tool. Right click. Actually, the first thing I want to do is make sure it's its own drawing. So click duplicate drawing, right click, and then click transform and say flip horizontal. Does it work? It work. Again. Transform, flip horizontal. There it goes. Again, make sure each of these are their own drawing. And one at a time, I would just go in here. Okay, so now they're all flipped the right way. They're just in the wrong location because they're still on this side of the head. If I wanted to, I could do some keyframes. Do F6 through here is fine, but from here to here, I just need to move that over to the other side of the head. Let's go get that at a different pivot point. Move that over here to this side of the head. And let's see what we got. So now we're getting that feeling that the nose is transitioning across that motion. All right. Now, one of the ways we can do this a little bit is with depth and the distance apart of objects. Right, so very quickly, I'm just going to create my right eye. Do it white. This. Go ahead and fill it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go kind of simple with this just for speed reasons. I'm just going to go ahead and put my iris inside here. Of course, you would want to do this with a whole separate layer. Right. So we get this. What I'm going to do for my right eye, I'm going to duplicate that. So I'm going to duplicate selected layers. Right. We'll go ahead and call it left eye. Apparently not. Oh, they already have left eye. My bad. Delete that. And so for my left eye, I'm going to select all of this, move it over here. But to make it look like it's a little further away, I'm just going to scale it just a little bit, right? So something like that. Maybe like, if you really want to exaggerate it, you can make it a little bit more, right? Just for, actually, I don't know. This will work. He'll be looking the wrong direction, but you'll get the idea. So one of the ways I can fake this is just based off of their distance apart, right? So right now they're always going to stay there, right, and look like this. But what I can do is I can animate each of these layers and make them a little bit different size, shape, and distance apart from each other, right? So if I go to F6 here, by the time we get to the end of this animation, I want them to be the same distance apart, right? But I want them to be on the other side of the head, and I want them to change scale. So that. This. And what I'm going to do with this eye, one, I'm going to skew it back because I'm getting that skew out of here from the head transformation. Something like this. Actually, I could do a full rotate on this if I wanted to, but I'm not sure what we're going to get out of that. That's not bad. Huh? Well, I would, but then you'd get a pop right in the middle. So like what I'm trying to do is try to prevent some of those pops. So I'm going to try not to actually have them look the other way. Just going to try to get further apart again. And so what we're going to get is a little bit of that sense of the eyes kind of changing just because one gets a little bit bigger than the other and kind of travels all the way across with it, right? Now, one of the other things I can do right here in the middle to increase that is they're still the same distance apart, right? So again, let me make sure I have keyframes set on everything. F6, F6. And so right here, I'm going to go ahead and hit F6. I'm just going to make them a little wider apart from each other. So this one will go over to here. This one will go over to here. And what we're going to see is that distance between their eyes is going to make them look like they're kind of moving in depth just a little bit. Right? So now it gets wider, they get closer together. Right? It's really kind of screwing with the illusion because he's still looking back. But yeah, oh, I see what you're saying. Like there's where you could reflect and flip them to get them looking the other direction. That probably would make more sense. I guess you could do that. In real life, you usually blink in a quick motion. And so in real life, I would actually probably have a blink right in the middle of that to fix it. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Like do the hit duplicate drawing, and then right there. Nope. I like it. I should leave it like that just for one frame. And I still think we're going to get a little bit of a flip right there, a little bit of a pop, but it's not much. So, yeah, you're right. That works pretty well. Okay. So even though he's still completely flat, we're just getting a little bit of that feeling of illusion without having to redraw every one of them. Sometimes to me, though, the biggest way to do this is to just hide that motion or hide that change in a quick motion, right? So, like, we could have our character with the mouth. We could start here. I could draw a very that cool property. Draw a very simple mouth shape. one either. Draw a very simple mouth shape that is already open. And somewhere in here, draw a different mouth shape that is closed, right? And then over here, I could have pretty much the same mouth shape again. So do copy cell, maybe right about here. Do paste cell from timeline. I would make sure that's a new frame. And then transform, flip horizontal. Now, F5, F5. What I would hope is that somewhere in this motion, I could hide the fact that there's a change, right? Either with some scale or something like that. So go ahead and hit F6 here. By the time we get to here, go ahead and hit F6 there. And then, of course, the end. Am I happy with where that's at? Let's do that there. Sorry, I don't think I needed to move that center point. I think I needed to move that drawing. And so with these keyframes, can I kind of hide that motion a little bit, right? Maybe as we're working toward this one, I could scale it, skew it, sort of move it in that direction, right? And then as we're coming over to here, kind of maybe do the same thing here in reverse. Scale it, rotate it, and then that needs to be back to normal. And so really kind of what I'm doing is I'm hiding it just a little bit in the overlapping action. So, that's a little bit big for that mouth motion. So I think it's because it's that big black hole in the face. So I'd probably make the middle mouth drawing just a little different, just to transition that a little bit better. Let's try right there on the mouth. Something like that. There we go. That's working a little bit better. Okay, so it's really subtle stuff, but once you start adding stuff like hair, If you have hair or an ear that goes from behind the character to in front of the character, um, those are things that you can really just sort of start to fake that whole 360-degree motion, right? Again, you don't need a rig that can do all of this because the chances of you needing to do this every other scene in an animation isn't very high, right? These are just little problem-solving things that are going to happen. Um, and you have to sort of think smarter, or was it work smarter, not harder? Um, like once you get your animatic done for your short film, you'll look at some of these shots and think, well, this is how I could do it, and that would be difficult, or what are some other tricks I could do to get that shot done more efficiently? Still has to be high quality, it still has to look good. What is the way you find to make that look good? Now, this character doesn't look good, but that's just because it's an ugly character, not because this wouldn't work with a fully designed character as well. So I wanted to take just another couple minutes, very briefly, talk just a little bit about some of the stuff you can do in the node editor that is already kind of in there, like little tricks for it. One of those I already showed you was like the option for shadows on this. And I think that let's get rid of these. Some of the things that you may not even realize are in here are like really kind of nice. Like there's a whole section of particles in here that are pretty much ready to go, right? And then you can change each of those, right? Let's go ahead and put him on a background layer. Oh no, you know what? Let's go ahead and save this as a new version. We'll do, let's do this in the rain scene. So we'll open our recent, week 3, not in the rain, in the forest scene. Right? So we have this scene here that's already kind of moody, right? In our particles, there are a couple of pre-made particle systems. Right? So there's like animated grass. There is, actually if we expand these out, under these examples here is where we're going to see them. So grass, there's a couple of different rains. I personally kind of like this rain 3 right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this in. I'll go ahead and turn my color card back on. I'm going to go ahead and plug this rain 3 in. If I drag it in here, you'll see that what I get is an entirely new system plugged into its own composite, right? Well, I can just plug that composite node into my composite node, and now I have that whole system. But there's some things in here I don't need, right? Like I don't need this character. So I'll go ahead and hit OK, delete that out of there. I don't need this color card. But now I have this rain system and this rain effect built in here. And if I hit play, can you kind of see what's happening there? It's maybe a little easier to see without our color card. Basically what we're getting is these, actually I'll show you without any of our scene. We're getting these little rain elements that are just going to start falling from the sky and splattering everywhere, right? If we dig into this, like really, it's not necessarily that this is like pre-made rain for you to use, because obviously it doesn't work so well with ours because of the color of the rain. The point of it is if we dig into here, we can see how they work and we can leverage these, right? So if I open up this rain effect, it's actually pretty complicated, but one of the things you do see here is this raindrops TVG. Right? And if I go in here and look at that, this rain effect, these raindrops TVG, not showing me the drawing. Oh, let's go back to the beginning here. You'll see that it's just these 4 drawings, right? And if we look at those 4 drawings, you'll see really quickly it's just these 4 different lines that all have this same color, right? So some of the things I could do is just go through here and find out which color this is and change it. And I can make this a different color for that. If we dig into some of these other elements, like we have the rain spots, I think that's where it hits the ground. That's these splashes. So we basically just have these 4 splash drawings, right? It's actually just 3. Which means I could go through here and replace these drawings and have my own custom rain, right? I could have it look like big, like blue water droplet splashes instead of these little gray ticks, right? And so that's something to consider. Probably what I would end up doing, sort of one easy solution here, is I can add me a new color. I'm just going to make this kind of light. And then just with my fill bucket, I could go in here and recolor these as well. And just get a completely different rain effect from that. Works. Go. And then again, my rain drops. I'll do the same there. These splashes, this is a little bit of a different splash. And I think that may be all of it. And so by doing that, now my rain is much lighter because I changed that color. And if I don't like that, I can make it rain whatever I want it to, right? And if I go back in here and start turning on my character, my scene. Now, one of the things you may notice in this is that the rain looks like it's kind of hitting in the wrong spot. Right? Like look, it's like it's above the ground. We can use our node view to adjust that. Right? So I can go back into these nodes and I can move each of these elements however I want to. So I'm just going to grab this rain effect and hit Control P, right? And I'm going to map this peg to all 3 of these. And then I'm just going to go here on my perspective. Go in here and just move that peg downward so it hits in a spot that makes more sense. Also, apparently, you need to adjust in 3D view because it's hitting a little too far forward there. So layer properties, enable 3D, go back to my perspective view, and tumble around here. Maybe move that a little closer and go something more like this, and this. Just want to look more realistic in our view here. I may actually just turn this alpha down a little bit on that rain. It's not quite as strong. So It's a very easy way to adjust a lot of different elements and give it some ambiance. So, okay. A whole bunch of little stuff. I think one of the takeaways from this is I encourage you to play in the node editor. Like, I know it's not, like, just go in there and say, hey, I wonder what this thing does, and then try to figure it out. Sometimes it's not anything interesting at all. Sometimes it's very interesting, right? But I think that you'll be able to get some pretty neat effects out of it. One of the things I was able to do, I wasn't completely happy with the result, but it's more for the character style than anything, is that you can get real-time lighting in here. You can adjust how lighting hits certain objects in 3D space, right? And so you can make lighting sort of fall off into the background, and you can do a whole bunch of stuff with it. So, all right, any questions on any of this? All right, I'm going to shut up and let you get some work done then. Next class period, I'm going to hop into the lip sync shot. I'm going to bring my own audio and my own character, and I'm just going to animate that character speaking. Right? I would, again, encourage you to work in whatever way you learn the best. And so if that means the way you're going to learn the best is to bring your own audio clip and your own character and animate along with me, that's cool. If the way you learn the best is to watch and then try it again later, which is actually probably most people, then that's cool too. But just giving you a heads up, that's what's going to be happening, and that way you can be prepared to follow along however you want to. So, all right, rest of the class is yours. Have at it. Yes. This is how it's coming in, so we want to change it to this one. This is the final dash. I'd probably not put a number where it's going to be, but first and second answer. So when you're ready now, you just go to File, Export, and Write Notes. Just hit OK. I should regret this pages. And if you want to drop those in the revisions folder. Maybe we just was it 7 seconds. Somebody asked like comment and like first and stuff like that. But keep in mind that we're to, as long as it's not any speeches. But if like just keep in mind where you're applying to, you send that to some studios and that's hilarious, and other studios will be like, oh my god. You can try that. The thing I will say is make sure it's something that's completely understandable to the audience by itself. I've seen this before where people will be like, it's really funny if you know the context because of this. Yeah, we know. So like, you can make it have something that's understandable as it is. Switching it down. Maybe. So one thing you can do is you can turn back and change the selection sometimes. Back on that a little bit. And then back there. And then it's one, two, words. And so now it's just the drawings. Yeah, to do that, you have to create a new drawing. Yeah, what that will do is it will take that drawing and make a duplicate of it. Now, when you flip the duplicate, the way you do it is this sort of under there, and you highlight something, and you direct it, transform. Makes sense? You may need to keep both those two. It's still part of it. Oh, you're right. So you should probably leave that alone. And then highlight those. Yeah, so use the arrow tool. So, yeah. Usually, there's a way of doing it multiple times, but I haven't figured it out exactly yet. So part of the material I used to do it. Yeah. Well, so that's the hard thing. Like, the morph has to usually be a really simple object, and then it still does multiple numbers, right? It still has its issues. So I don't need to be recording this anymore, do I?